It's September 7th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with ASEAN-Indonesia 2023 over in Jakarta. President Yoon Suk-yeol has warned against attempted military deals with North Korea, apparently calling out Russia. He's attending the East Asia Summit today, with the regional security issues topping the agenda. A Chinese delegation will be in Pyongyang to join celebrations for North Korea's founding anniversary this Saturday. This will include a confirmed military parade. The United States has announced a $1 billion Ukraine aid package during U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken's surprise visit to the war-torn country. The package will include controversial depleted uranium munitions. President Yoon Suk-yeol on Wednesday held a dialogue with the 10-member ASEAN bloc and a +3 meeting of neighboring Northeast Asian countries. He called for a revival of trilateral cooperation with Japan and China, particularly on curbing North Korea's nuclear program. Our correspondent Oh Soo-young reports.
Seoul has warned that any attempt at arms cooperation with North Korea would be a direct threat to South Korea and global non-proliferation, as President Yoon Suk-yeol urged Indo-Pacific countries, including China, to cooperate for peace and prosperity. This came as Yoon attended a summit of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations in Jakarta, joined by Japan and China, in an ASEAN +3 session on Wednesday. First, amid speculation of a potential arms deal between North Korea and Russia, Yoon said attempts at military cooperation with North Korea that harm the peace of the international community must be stopped immediately.
If a major member of the UN Security Council cooperates in military technology or engages in arms trade with a state subject to the most stringent sanctions by the UN, this not only poses a direct challenge and threat to global peace, but also poses a direct threat to the security of the Republic of Korea. We are attaching great importance to it and looking at it very seriously.
Yoon requested that the countries present cooperate in denuclearizing the North and ending its illicit funding activities, such as cryptocurrency theft and the dispatch of workers overseas. Asked whether this was a message aimed at Beijing to put pressure on Moscow and Pyongyang ahead of their potential bilateral summit, a Yoon official told reporters that the president's remarks were made as North Korea's illegal actions are carried out on Chinese territory and on the high seas. He said China did not respond specifically to Yoon's request to fully implement UN Security Council sanctions against the North's regime, but added Beijing wouldn't intentionally take actions to increase Pyongyang's weapons capabilities. He also hinted that a separate meeting between Yoon and the Chinese premier on Thursday is being discussed. Amid geopolitical tensions, territorial disputes and ideological differences, all the more pronounced by President Xi Jinping sitting out the ASEAN and G20 summits this year, Yoon called for a resumption of the trilateral summit and mechanisms between South Korea, Japan and China in order to overcome critical challenges facing the region in joint efforts with ASEAN. As the rotating chair of the +3 countries this year, Seoul underscored the need to expand currency swaps, trade and investment, and sustainable support for small businesses in ASEAN. Yoon also outlined measures to increase food security, innovation and investment in young scientists.
Yoon will renew his call for a firm and decisive response to North Korea's threat, as well as greater cooperation for peace and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific, as he attends the East Asia Summit on Thursday and the G20 Summit in India over the weekend, where the United States, China and Russia will also participate. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News, Jakarta.
So President Yoon Suk-yeol is seeking to refresh a trilateral mechanism with Japan and China while aiming more warnings toward North Korea and Russia. Let's recap day 3 of the ASEAN summit with Professor Min-jae. Welcome, Professor Min.
Good morning.
So President Yoon Suk-yeol stressed that any arms deal or military cooperation with North Korea must stop. Now, that should be read as a warning targeting North Korea and Russia, right?
Yes, as you mentioned, President Yoon urged Russia not to take any attempts to pursue military cooperation with North Korea. Of course, it's not certain how much such a warning could be effective in stopping the military cooperation between North Korea and Russia. But it seems to be certain that South Korea expresses a strong grievance against Russia and its military cooperation with North Korea. And considering that the relationship between South Korea and Russia have been nowadays frozen in terms of the Ukraine war, it is unlikely that Russia would seriously listen to what South Korea wants in that aspect. And as the trilateral cooperation among South Korea, US, and Japan has been strengthened, it is expected that the bilateral and the trilateral cooperation among North Korea, China, and the Russia will be also strengthened. It means that the security situation on the Korean Peninsula continues to be grave for some time.
Professor Min, then let's say those arms deals with North Korea do take place, then what kind of measures do you think the trilateral, the ally or the partnership you say is how Washington and Tokyo, they will take in case of those arms cooperation? I mean, would that be more sanctions? I mean, what else can they do?
There could be several options that the three countries, South Korea, US, and Japan, would take to respond to the arms deals between North Korea and Russia. In my opinion, on the one hand, they are likely to strengthen their military cooperation to cope with the military movement or activities between North Korea and Russia. And then, on the other hand, it is expected that they will try to impose more sanctions against North Korea and Russia in the international community, like the United Nations Security Council sanctions. And each country will also try to put the more unilateral sanctions against them. Of course, it's not clear whether their attempts to put more sanctions at the United Nations would work, because, as you know, Russia is one of the 5 permanent UN Security Council members. And meanwhile, it is likely that other major international community members, like many European countries and other democratic countries, will support the attempts. So I think that the measures that the three countries would take against North Korea and Russia would contribute to putting more sanctions to the sanctions and the limitations to the two countries.
Right. When talking about reactions from the international community, we have to talk about China. You know, China's role and responsibility always being questioned. Can we actually expect China to play a mediating role when dealing with North Korea's threats this time?
Well, personally, this time, I don't think that China would play a constructive or the mediating role in curbing the North Korea's military provocations. As you know, China faces various problems nowadays. It suffers from its domestic problems like real estate problems, lower economic growth, and higher unexpected unemployment rates among younger people. In addition, China has external problems like its border disputes with India, Japan's nuclear contaminated water release problem, and the territorial disputes over the South China Sea, and most importantly, its strategic competition with the United States. So recently it is reported that President Xi Jinping unexpectedly made the decision not to attend the upcoming G20 summit meeting in India. So taken together, it seems that President Xi needed to have some time to save his face in the international community. So I don't think that China has any strong and active intention to play a constructive role to cope with North Korean threats and provocations. Instead, I think we needed to allow China to have some time before it comes back to the international stage.
Right, rather pessimistic view on China playing a constructive role this time either. Now, there is speculation that arms deal or cooperation with North Korea will tighten Pyongyang, Moscow, Beijing ties, right? Now, how will that trilateral ties change dynamic in Northeast Asia?
Well, it seems that the trilateral cooperation among North Korea, China, and Russia will strengthen. As I mentioned earlier today, their counterparts, like the trilateral cooperation among South Korea, US, and Japan, has been strengthened. And if the three countries, North Korea, China, and Russia, make arms deals and the military cooperation, like having a joint military drill, it will make the security situation of Northeast Asia much more grave. It is mainly because it would be inevitable for the three countries, their counterparts, South Korea, US, and Japan, needed to strengthen their military cooperation against their counterparts' military actions. So such a situation will make the competition and conflict between the two groups and the camps more serious. So it means that the security situation in Northeast Asia will continue to be grave in the coming months and years.
All right, Professor Min, thank you so much for your insight this morning. You have a good day.
You too. Thank you.
And the U.S. has once again warned North Korea of repercussions should it supply weapons to Russia, while raising concerns over deepening North Korea-China-Russia relations. White House and National Security Council Strategic Communications Coordinator John Kirby on Wednesday said Washington once again urges that North Korea not get involved in military transfers or the Ukraine war, adding the North had previously provided rockets and shells to Russia's mercenary Wagner Group. He also highlighted South Korea, U.S.-Japan defense cooperation commitments, adding that Washington is closely monitoring the burgeoning relationship between North Korea, China, and Russia, which he says all view the U.S. as a kind of common enemy. And a Chinese delegation is visiting North Korea for the regime's 75th founding anniversary on September 9th. According to Pyongyang state-run media on Thursday, the delegation headed by Ryu Go-jung, Vice Premier of the State Council of China, will visit North Korea to participate in the celebratory events. North Korea previously said the events will include another military parade. And this follows China having sent a delegation in July to the North on the 70th anniversary of the Korean War Armistice, or Victory Day, as called by the North. These delegation exchanges, largely seen as a show of solidarity, come amid speculation of Kim Jong-un's visit to Russia for arms deal talks. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken headed to Ukraine on Wednesday with another $1 billion aid package to the country, but this time including depleted uranium munitions. Our Choi Soo-hyung tells us more.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken made a surprise visit to Ukraine on Wednesday local time and announced an additional $1 billion of support. Blinken pleaded ongoing U.S. support for Ukraine and stated that plans are in place for support in the areas of energy, security, and humanitarian assistance, in addition to military support and reconstruction efforts.
We will continue to stand by Ukraine's side, and today we're announcing new assistance totaling more than $1 billion in this common effort. That includes $665.5 million in new military and civilian security assistance.
Meanwhile, the support package includes depleted uranium munitions, which are designed to pierce thick tank armor. The munitions use is controversial due to possible health risks. It is the first time the U.S. has provided depleted uranium munitions. The support package includes other anti-tank weapons as well as ammunition, air defense systems, and demining assistance.
I discussed longer-term sustainable security arrangements, which will provide ongoing security assistance and modern military equipment across land, air, sea, and cyberspace, as well as training and intelligence sharing.
Secretary Blinken, on his fourth visit since the war began, has expressed great optimism, noting significant progress in Ukraine's counteroffensive. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba also emphasized the strong support of the United States, describing it as a robust partner.
If the West cannot win in this war, then what is the war that the West can win? And when I say the West, I include Ukraine to this list as well.
Meanwhile, on Wednesday, an attack on a market street in Konstantinivka in Ukraine's Donetsk region killed at least 17 people, including a child. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
The European Union has unveiled a set of laws to curb the power of 6 major tech companies, including Google and Apple. But this Digital Markets Act excludes South Korean tech giant Samsung Electronics. Lee Seung-ja has more.
The Digital Markets Act is a set of laws set forth by the EU to curb the power of 6 major tech companies. The 6 companies, Alphabet, Amazon, Apple, ByteDance, Meta, and Microsoft, will be subject to special regulations to prevent abuse of dominant market positions in the bloc. The European Commission announced Wednesday that the 6 gatekeeper companies, meaning large platform operators that act as a kind of gateway between consumers and sellers, will be subject to special regulations under the Digital Markets Act from next year. By applying stricter regulations on such companies, the EU plans to fundamentally block practices in which these companies use their superior market power to raise entry barriers and undermine a fair competition environment. Companies designated as gatekeepers are strictly prohibited from cross-using users' personal information acquired through their services when conducting other service projects unless they have user consent. However, there was good news for South Korean tech giant Samsung Electronics, as the company has been excluded from the list despite being mentioned previously as a strong candidate. Companies that fail to comply with the latest EU laws will face major penalties, including a fine of up to 10% of total annual sales. That figure could go up 20% for repeat violations. The gatekeeper companies will be granted a grace period of approximately 6 months to comply with the DMA before full implementation of the rules in March 2024. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
South Korean defender Min-jae has been named among 30 finalists for Ballon d'Or 2023, becoming the first Asian defender to be named under a shortlist. The 26-year-old, who held Nepali win the Serie title last season for the first time in 33 years, has been named among some of the world's top footballers, including Erling Haaland and Lionel Messi. With the help of Kim, Nepali conceded the lowest number of goals in 2022-2023 season, earning him the league's top defender award. Kim moved to Germany's Bayern Munich during the summer transfer window, playing alongside another Ballon d'Or finalist and a former teammate of Son Heung-min, Harry Kane. Showing your passport and boarding pass at departure halls has been a long part of the usual routine at airports, but that might not be the case anymore at Seoul's Incheon International Airport, with passengers' faces actually replacing passports and boarding passes. Our Lee Soo-jin tells us more.
Passengers at Incheon International Airport are facing new technology. The new Smart Pass service at the country's largest airport streamlines the passenger identification process by using facial recognition technology. Passengers no longer need to take out their passports and boarding passes at departure halls and boarding gates. All they need is their face. Both foreign and South Korean nationals aged 7 and above can register for the new service with 2 ways to opt in. One way is by downloading the SmartPass mobile app and registering by scanning your passport and face. While airports in other countries have already implemented similar facial recognition systems, the one at Incheon Airport is the only one where users can register on mobile apps. Passengers can also register on site at self-check-in kiosks. Just like the mobile app, all you have to do is scan your passport and register your facial biometrics 30 minutes before you need to use the service. The mobile app and the self-check-in kiosks are both available in English, Korean, Japanese, and Chinese. Your facial identification data is also valid for 5 years.
And now you can simply walk up to the camera and go through right away without needing to show anyone your passport or your boarding pass.
So far, people from 46 different countries have registered, according to an airport official. It has also been well received by passengers since it was first introduced in late July during the peak summer holiday season.
And you don't need a lot of people manning it, and it's all very automated. You just check in, and then you're kind of done.
Before we used to wait a long time, but the identification process is a lot more convenient and faster, which is why I decided to sign up for this service.
Incheon Airport officials say that it'll also enhance security as human biometrics are impossible to duplicate. And it's being done without compromising passengers' privacy.
We regularly delete private passenger information according to related laws.
The airport is looking to expand the service, which is currently available at all 6 departure halls and 16 boarding gates, so that it can also be used at all gates by April 2025. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Matthew Ashley, and we now turn over to stories from around the world. We begin in the United Kingdom, where a nationwide manhunt is underway for a suspected terrorist who escaped a prison in southwest London. Now, according to authorities, 21-year-old Daniel Abid Khalif vanished on Wednesday morning local time. He was last seen wearing a prison-issue chef's uniform, and it's suspected that he escaped by attaching himself to the underside of a food delivery van. Now, as part of their response, authorities have increased security at border checkpoints and ports. Police say he poses a low risk to public safety, but have urged people not to approach Khalif. Khalif had been awaiting trial on terrorism and Official Secrets Act offences. Now, the death toll from the floods in the south of Brazil has now climbed to 36 people. Officials announced this on Wednesday and said search and rescue operations are ongoing. The state of Rio Grande do Sul was worst hit, with rising waters flooding streets and submerging houses in several cities. There were also several landslides. Now, the flooding comes after more than 300 millimeters of rain fell on the region in less than 24 hours. Downpours have since stopped, but are forecast to resume between Wednesday and Thursday, and more flooding is expected. The disaster comes after over 40 people were killed earlier this year in landslides and flooding in Brazil's Sao Paulo state. Now, August 2023 is the hottest August ever recorded. That's at least according to the European Union Climate Change Service on Wednesday, who said August this year was 1.5 degrees hotter than the pre-industrial era average, a temperature threshold that the world is trying to stay below. It also marks the third straight month that such a record has been set, following the hottest ever June and July. The agency also said that this summer was the warmest ever, with an average global temperature of 16.8 degrees Celsius. Experts are blaming the increasing temperatures on human activity, as well as additional warming caused by the El Niño. And finally, legendary English rock band The Rolling Stones are set to launch a new album, which will be their first since 2005. It's called Hackney Diamonds, with the name coming from East London slang that refers to broken window glass from a robbery. Now, the 12-track album is set to hit shelves on October 20th. It contains collaborations with stars including Lady Gaga and Stevie Wonder, as well as earlier recordings with drummer Charlie Watts, who died in 2021. The 3-time Grammy-winning band formed in 1962, with Mick Jagger and Keith Richards among the founding members.
Good morning. It was a rough morning commute for those in southern regions and Jeollado provinces due to that thick fog. Please drive with care until the sun is shining fully. Despite a breezy start, the highs will soar with a heat advisory remaining in place for Jeollado and nearby areas and parts of Chungcheong-Namdo province. Meanwhile, east of Gangwon-do province will be as cool as yesterday. Plenty of autumn sunshine will boost UV rays to height of very high in large parts of Korea. So please have your sun protection handy today. Afternoon highs will jump nearly 10 degrees from our morning temperatures, Seoul, Gwangju topping out at 32 degrees. A late burst of afternoon summer heat will continue to be felt across Korea for the next 5 days under sunny skies and should stay this way until a wet change sweeps in. But we do need to put the light jacket on when the sun is not out. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day and Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for Friday's edition at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.
하나, 둘, 셋.
Hey, Mr. Cupid, who's mine? Make sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포토스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니?
Arrow straight through my heart.
웰컴. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 웰컴. (24시간) 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
Busan, Korea is already reaching the entire world, like ocean waves that travel far and wide. It's Busan, the perfect World Expo city, transforming our world, navigating toward a better future.
한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 웰컴. (24시간) 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 하나, 둘, 셋.
Hey, Mr. Cupid, who's lying? Make sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포토스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니?
Arrow straight through my heart.
We're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's September 7th here in Seoul. I'm Seoul, and this is News Generation, where we make the news at Arirang's very own open studio. Every morning, we'll discuss the top issues and latest current affairs affecting people in their 20s and 30s. Joining me in the studio is Cheska Dainha.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, and Kim Seong.
Good morning.
Now, both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. As usual, let's start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. There are animals that are damaging both the environment and the economy. According to the UN Environment Program, invasive species are costing the world at least $423 billion each year, mainly because they cause other plants or animals to go extinct and are threatening food security. An animal is considered invasive when there are alien species that settles in a new area and then disrupts local ecosystems. There's around 37,000 alien species known across the world. Moving on to our second story. In a few weeks' time, Koreans will be going around the country to meet their relatives and enjoy Chuseok. That's Korean Thanksgiving. On this holiday, families greet each other with fruit baskets and gifts, but the Korea Rural Economic Institute has found that the price of fruit will become more expensive in September compared to last year due to lower production due to severe weather as well as higher demand. Popular fruit for Chuseok like apples will most likely see their prices double. And last but not least, we're just months away from this year's college entrance exam, also known as the CSAT. Yesterday was the last opportunity for students to take a mock test, and eyes are on this year's state-run exam because it's the first time officials have decided to take out so-called killer questions. These are extremely difficult questions that aren't taught on the school curriculum and rather only taught at private education institutes. Now, back in June, the Education Ministry said it would take out killer questions to narrow the gap between students who only have access to public education and those who can afford private education. So I now like to ask our panelists in the studio, Seong, why don't you tell us a bit more about how students and teachers reacted to yesterday's CSAT mock test? What was the difficulty level like, and did they really take out these so-called killer questions?
Yes, I mean, after this June's mock Sunung exam, the Korean government announced that they will exclude all killer questions from the future Sunung exams. And so they did for this September mock exam that took place countrywide yesterday. Last night, many reviewed this September paper and came to a conclusion that for the Korean language subject, that although the killer questions were removed, there were semi-killer questions that were very difficult, as well as the multiple choice questions increasing in difficulty. For mathematics and English subject, it was actually a lot easier, and many expect there to be quite high grades for both of the subjects. subjects. And so, it was great to see that the mock exams were actually a little bit more manageable.
Right.
And many say the diagrams as well as tables that were in the exams were very similar to the study guides that were produced by the EBS, the Educational Broadcasting System, that is used in the public teaching system. So this is a great news because it will lower the barrier and sort of reduce the private education that's been a burden for all Korean students.
Right, but certain experts are concerned that there would be no differentiation as to who did a really good job, because if you make one little mistake, that could cost you your dream college.
Many were saying that especially for maths, we might have a lot of full grades, 100% marks as well,
Right, and Cheska, I think you can speak on behalf of all the test takers out there. You've been through the SAT process yourself, so could you tell aspiring college students out there or give them like any words of advice?
Oh my God, that's a lot of pressure. Because I know they already have a lot of pressure.
Did you do well? That's the question we're going to ask.
Actually, by that standard, I think I am able to give some advice.
Right.
But, I think for a Korean SAT, the CSAT, I think the pressure is even higher. And I am not unaware of it because they only get to take the test once.
Right.
And everything is determined by that one grade. So I know that students are undergoing a lot of pressure. And I also understand that these killer questions are very important because they differentiate between people, because still tests are relative. So it's compared to how you're doing with the class that you took the test with. However, I am, as a student myself, am very glad that they did take out these killer questions because, one, it puts a lot of pressure on the students, and as we mentioned, it's a need for a private education to excel. So I'd rather that we, sort of gear the academic excellence towards more global competitions like Olympiads, and have the standard tests sort of, give the students the freedom and the ability to exercise, at least show what they've learned in high school, not having to go above and beyond.
And I'd like to tell all our viewers who are watching this, who are taking this year's Sunan, good luck. There's only around 2 months remaining, and just because
good luck,
you might not have done the best in the mock test, but you still have 2 months, so
your life will be perfectly fine even if you don't have
exactly. Take it from us. All right, that was our news feed for this Thursday. Let's move on to our main discussion topic of the day. Every Thursdays, we've been designating this day to talk about environmental issues, and today is Blue Sky Day, so take a look at the screen to find out what we'll be talking about today. Back in 2019, then President Min-jae made a keynote address to the United Nations. There, he proposed designating September 7th as International Day of Clean Air for Blue Skies, or Blue Sky Day for short. This is to boost the public's awareness of air pollution and encourage them to change daily habits. Since 2020, the Korean government and the UN Environment Program have been working to uphold the objective of this day globally. One of the biggest benefits of living in Korea for me personally used to be enjoying the autumn because the skies were clear and blue. But over the past few years, it's been hard to comfortably look up and breathe in clean air due to air pollution and fine dust. Now, here in the studio, would you guys agree?
Yeah, I mean, I do agree. It's been quite difficult, heavy pollution in the past few years. And I mean, today is indeed the day of clean air for blue skies. A fantastic name. I think it's very fitting for what Korea is going through now. We've seen most of the times in Korea, the autumn, as you mentioned, Grace, is a very, very lovely period of season. We have, very distinct 4 seasons in South Korea. And as you can see, we have very high skies, very mild temperatures, perfect for outdoor activities and everything beyond going out to enjoy the nature. So, I mean, but blue skies have sometimes been difficult to see in South Korea, especially pre-COVID times. 2019 and earlier, South Korea had twice higher fine dust pollution compared to the OECD average. It was estimated 4 times higher than the lowest fine dust polluted country, Finland. However, funnily enough, as COVID hit full storm in East Asia, majority of factories in China were temporarily shut. And during the period of COVID, I actually seen some of the cleanest skies I've seen in the past decade. So, I mean, as the hot summer passes, I really do hope to see some of the beautiful skies we've been seeing in the past few years happening again this autumn.
That too, but I think due to COVID-19 restrictions at the time, not a lot of people moved about in the country, so not a lot of cars were out on the streets.
Yeah.
I think that all contributed to cleaner air quality here in Korea. But Cheska, would you agree that we're seeing blue skies in Korea these days, or there's a lot of fine dust? What do you think?
You know, as an avid rider, hiker, I love being outdoors, and all of these exercises require intake of air.
Not to be confused, rider, horse riding, not motorcycle and all the fumes.
I mean,
I ride bikes, I ride horses, I don't ride any motorized vehicle currently. But so I would always have to check the air quality. But when it was so low, it was so dismal to look at it that I just completely stopped looking at it at all. But for my friends who have asthma and my families who have, little children, I realized how sensitive they are to the air quality every time they would check, because the little children would get like eye rashes, and my friends with asthma, they would have severe breathing problems during this season. So I realized that it's actually getting pretty serious, and that we really need to take actions to remedy the situation.
Yeah, I mean, talking about asthma, I actually had severe asthma when I was little, and now I'm perfectly fine. I think the big reason was because I actually lived in New Zealand for a bit when I was younger, and that kind of really fixed everything. Clean air. I'd usually go on like not marathon, what do you call those?
Cross-country.
Cross-country, there we go, yeah. And those actually really seem to have improved my condition as well. So I think clean air really do help in your health.
It is really important, and as you guys mentioned, it's really sad to see toddlers having to bring out their face masks
their
to
masks
go to school.
And everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I remember coming back from like a different country to Korea, and they're like, "Mommy, do I still have to put my face mask on here?" And that just shows that air quality is really important because it does affect their health. And we asked our viewers around the world if they've experienced fine dust or suffered from air pollution in their countries, and here's what 3 of them had to say. Take a look at the screen to find out. Let's start with Robert. Robert said, "Fine dust is okay with me, just so long as it's fine and not poisonous. I wouldn't like a blocked nose from thick dust, though, as it would be very uncomfortable." Tasmia said, "As a woman who has asthma, I despise fine dust. People should make products that protect us from fine dust. Masks are not enough." And Mola said, "Woke up in the morning and saw yellow dust on my desk in my dorm room. It was the first time I witnessed this and found out that it's a thing in Korea." So our viewers do know about fine dust, and it could be detrimental to our health, but just how exactly? Cheska, why don't you walk us through?
Yeah, and I don't want to sound too dismal, but I think the facts have to be known about how serious the issue is. Because, I mean, the importance of air quality cannot be overemphasized. Let's face it, any healthy, any rich person, you don't give, air for 2 minutes, the person
Exactly, we breathe 24/7.
Exactly.
That's the thing we do.
Exactly. And according to the UN, 1/3 of death that has been caused by stroke, lung cancer, has been caused by fine dust.
Right.
And currently in 2016, there have been about 2.6 million premature deaths due to indoor and outdoor pollution. And this number is expected to escalate almost by 50% in the next 25 years. So this is an issue that requires serious attention. And as we all know, the fine dust can cause breathing problems, respiratory distress, and even the WHO research agency have classified it as, group 1 carcinogen. Premature cause for cancer, and even some of the bowel irritation disease as well, which I didn't know until I did the research.
And I think it has some psychological effects too. I don't know about you guys, but whenever I look at the sky and it's not as blue that day, I feel really upsetting. It's very upsetting.
It's a very good point.
You don't really want to go outside and stuff like that. Would you like to add on?
I mean, you mentioned a good point about the bowel, inflammatory bowel diseases as well. Because in a recent research paper, the Korea Research Institute of Bioscience and Biotechnology, the KRIBB, very long name, their research team identified the mechanism by which fine dust causes inflammatory bowel diseases to worsen. So it's also pointed out one of the main causes of cardiovascular diseases, as well as cerebrovascular diseases to happen and to worsen if you've been exposed for an extended period of time to fine dust.
Right. And like most environmental issues, this isn't something we can do just as an individual or just as a country alone to solve. Trying to bring down fine dust levels and make clear blue skies is definitely a global issue. So, Xian, why don't you walk us through on some collective efforts being made abroad?
Exactly. I think globally we've been really trying to cut down air pollution as well as different greenhouse gas emissions, all included in the same package. I think one of the main ones we could talk about is the Paris Agreement. We might have all heard about it. Paris Agreement is an international agreement with the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC, dealing with the greenhouse gas emissions, mitigation adaptation, as well as making sure that we bring down the pollution levels up to a reasonable standard. We also have things like the Clean Air Act, enacted in the US by the government to set the national standards for air quality. In the EU, European Union, we have the emissions trading system, where there's a cap and trade, pollution trading system, where you can actually regulate greenhouse gas emissions from power plants, as well as different industrial sites, factories, etc. The Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol was also very crucial in dropping the usage of hydrofluorocarbons.
Right.
So that actually really contributed to the global air standards, as well as the recent Global Methane Pledge. Now, this was interesting because the Global Methane Pledge made sure 45% of all global methane producing countries were involved in the agreement, and they will try to bring down the emissions rate by 30% by 2030. So it's really almost getting there, and we hope to see some of the real results being shown to the public as well.
Exactly. Beyond all these figures, we hope to see some actual results. But what about here in Korea?
You know, I'm really glad that there are global cooperation going on, because this is a transboundary issue.
Right.
So global cooperation is definitely important. But of course, each country needs to take responsibility. And South Korea has established stringent air quality standards and emission reduction targets. You know, public agency vehicles, 2-day rotation policies, adjusted construction site working hours, you know, operating street cleaning vehicles, and you're really trying to implement measures to suppress the dust by using dust covers. So South Korea is definitely active in the approach and policies in order to reduce this fine dust and air pollution quality as much as possible. However, I still feel like there needs to be more done.
There definitely needs to be more done, and let's find out what we need to be doing that by including a professor of atmospheric sciences in our talks right after this. We're now going to include a professor of atmospheric sciences in our talks. It's Professor John Lin from the University of Utah in the States. Welcome, Dr. Lin.
Welcome, Professor.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
All right, we've been talking about the severe microdust situation in Korea, but could you compare our situation to other parts of the world? And are there any figures or comparisons you could provide to us that could help us better understand how urgent of an issue this is?
Well, from the numbers you were talking about earlier, South Korea can be doing better. I think about South Korea as such an advanced and prosperous nation with some of the most, advanced technology in the world. So I think South Korea can do better. The annual average fine particulate matter, what you call microdust level in South Korea is about twice that of the US. So there's a lot of room for improvement. And as you were saying earlier about the UN's report, there are millions of deaths that could result from air quality around the world. So for the sake of the South Korean citizens, there's a lot that can be done. And I should also mention that climate change is likely to worsen the situation when you think about potential desertification, so dust transport. There's also certain pollutants like ozone that could be worsened under increasing temperature. So I'm glad you mentioned the Paris Agreement and greenhouse gas emissions, because in my mind, I think those two, climate change and air quality, go hand in hand.
For sure.
You know, Professor, my family lives in New York, and I visited LA a couple of times for business, and I realized that even in the US, the air pollution quality is getting worse. You're based in the States right now. How are the cities in the US trying to tackle the air pollution issue at the moment?
I might differ a little bit. Actually, there's been tremendous progress in the US in terms of air quality over time. And LA, likewise, LA used to be the poster child for bad air quality.
Oh, yeah.
It's gotten better over time, thanks to Clean Air Act. So what that shows is government policy, collective action does matter. Now, that being said, there are episodic pretty bad air quality events in LA, New York. We just were watching the wildfires impact on New York and DC. You know, those images are pretty horrifying, right? And again, that's linked to climate change as well with wildfires. Where I am based in Salt Lake City, on average, the air quality is decent. It's sort of average US level, but we do have challenges from time to time.
Yes, Dr. Lin, I'm actually very glad to hear that the Clean Air Act is very effective, and it did help some parts of the US clean up their air as well. I mean, so related to that, I mean, what do you think needs to be done to improve the general air quality around the world? And are there any sort of exemplary policies that Korea could adopt here locally, as well as if you could also explain some of the things we as individuals could do to improve general air quality? That'll be fantastic.
Absolutely. There are some pretty sort of clear evidence of policies that work. One is trying to reduce the reliance on coal-fired power plants. So trying to generate less electricity from coal. And coal power fire plants emit a lot of pollution. And that also includes greenhouse gases. So in many ways, by moving away from coal-powered generation of electricity, you get sort of win-win situation. You reduce greenhouse gas emissions, you fight climate change, and you improve people's health. So that is a very clear example of a very successful policy. There are also very clear examples of when you talk about cities, driving less, relying less on internal combustion engines, taking more public transit. I think you were talking about the COVID shutdown, right? I think we all have this shared experience having less cars on the road and look how clear the sky is, right? Yeah. So it's sort of a really unfortunate experiment that we all did as a world, but look at what we got, right? Blue skies for several months.
Right. Indeed. We got it back. All right. Thank you so much, Professor Lin. It was a pleasure to talk to you today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
All right, guys, I'd like to ask you guys the last question then. How do you guys think we can better protect ourselves from fine dust, air pollution, and keep the skies blue?
You know, as Professor mentioned, I think the government effort is definitely crucial because the government really needs to take a lead on this to make sure that people are accountable for what they're doing. I am a high proponent, as many of you know, of riding bicycles. I really think we should invest a lot more in bike lanes, but I also came up with this idea of having environmental taxes for having personal automobile, depending on the fuel they use. And also, you know, maybe a lot of subsidies and investment in green energy. Because let's face it, every investment that we're making towards improving air pollution is not only positive, but extremely exigent. So I think that's
exactly. I mean, also pinpointing to the point of the size of the engine and things like that, there is already a tax. People get taxed on your vehicles depending on how big your engine is, 2,000 cc's, 3,000 cc's, different as well. So I think that's a good thing that we're doing. And I think one of the main things we could be doing is also avoid a few things, right? Avoid idling your car, avoid sitting in your car with the engine on, with the AC on, waiting for your friend and things like that. You know, get out the car, turn off the engine, sit around outside, enjoy the breeze. Also drive less, you know, don't try to take your car everywhere. There's traffic everywhere in Seoul City as well. Public transport would be a fantastic option. And I think what the professor said, choosing cleaner burning fuels like electricity, like natural gases, would actually help the environment a lot more. But the last but not the least, planting more trees.
Planting more trees.
Go around, plant trees, provide more oxygen for everybody.
And here in Korea, April 5th is Shingmogyeol, which is Arbor Day, where you plant trees. But hopefully, we don't need to just plant trees on Arbor Day. We could go around and either buy a plant or plant a tree. And changing daily habits, I think that could really help. Baby steps, that's key. And we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Cheska Dainong.
Pleasure's always mine, thank you.
And Kim Xiang.
My pleasure.
All right, and thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are News Generation.
한국에 오면 먹어야죠.